Welcome to Chinese History and Mythology.
Hello, my friends. Welcome back to Chinese History and Mythology. In the last episode, we talked about a very dramatic story from the middle and later years of the Zhou dynasty, a story full of warnings and strange signs. It took place during the reign of King Xuan of Zhou. He started out as a fairly diligent ruler. With the help of several wise ministers, he once pulled the Zhou dynasty back a little from the edge of decline. But as time went on, problems inside the state grew worse and worse. And in his anxiety, King Xuan slowly began to cross more and more lines. The whole story began with a children's rhyme that suddenly spread through the capital. It was a short chant sung by a group of kids, clapping their hands in rhythm. The words said, "The moon is about to rise, the sun is about to set, a bow made from mulberry wood, a quiver woven from wild grass. The state of Zhou is about to fall." King Xuan heard this rhyme while returning to the city at night. He was deeply disturbed and felt it was a curse aimed at him and at the kingdom. He flew into a rage, ordered the children to be arrested and questioned, and banned the rhyme inside the city. Anyone who dared sing it would have their whole family punished. Very soon, the rhyme was brought into court and became the focus of a serious discussion among the ministers. Different officials offered different explanations. Some said that bows and arrows stood for war, and that this might be a sign that endless wars would bring disaster. Others believed the rhyme was really talking about problems inside the state itself. In their view, the line about the rising moon and the setting sun was likely hinting that women in the inner palace would interfere in politics and cause chaos. King Xuan listened, but he was not fully convinced. Right at this sensitive moment, something even stranger happened inside the palace. An old palace maid who had been locked up in the inner quarters for 40 years suddenly gave birth to a baby girl. She said that back in the time of the previous king, she had stepped on a small creature that came from dragon saliva, and from that day, her belly began to grow bigger and bigger. It sounded completely unbelievable, yet this was how things had unfolded. The queen thought the child was ominous and immediately ordered people to wrap the baby girl in a straw mat and throw her into the clear water river. When King Xuan heard about this, he felt even more that it was some kind of message sent from heaven. He asked Bo Yangfu, the grand historian, to cast a divination. The results said that the matter was not over yet and that they had to be especially careful. So King Xuan gave an order to search the whole city for the baby girl, whether alive or dead. If anyone had pulled her out of the water, they had to report it. At the same time, he issued another order that no one was allowed to make or sell bows from wild mulberry, wood, or quivers from wild grass, because he believed the unlucky things mentioned in the rhyme were hiding in these objects. While this ban was being carried out, a farming couple from the countryside, who had not heard the news, brought bows and quivers into the city to sell. The wife was caught on the spot. The husband managed to escape. The official in charge wanted to give King Xuan a quick answer and also wanted to make the rhyme come true. So he simply had the innocent woman put to death. This event shocked the whole city. But the story did not stop there. The husband who escaped later found the baby girl who had been thrown into the river. To his surprise, the baby had not died. A flock of birds were actually pushing the straw mat toward the riverbank with their beaks. He felt that this child clearly had a strong fate and was probably not an ordinary person. So he picked her up and decided to raise her somewhere else. Back in the palace, King Xuan was crushed by the pressure of the children's rhyme, by the strange case of the baby girl, and by all kinds of strange signs appearing one after another. His mind grew more and more unstable. He blamed Dubo, the official in charge of the search, saying that Dubo had stopped the investigation on his own and had not done his duty. He ordered Dubo to be beheaded on the spot. Dubo's friend, Zhou, stepped forward to remonstrate. He even said he was willing to die with him and argued that such killings should not happen. But King Xuan refused to calm down and drove Zhou to a dead end as well. Zhou went home, took his own life, and became a famous, straight-talking minister who dared to die for what he believed. All these things left King Xuan exhausted in both body and mind. His spirit became more and more confused. Later, he went out hunting, hoping to relax a little. But on the road, he saw the ghosts of Dubo and Zhou driving a chariot, holding red bows and red arrows, pointing at him and declaring that he must pay for his injustice with his life. King Xuan was so terrified that he fainted on the chariot. After that, his illness grew worse, and the kingdom moved step by step toward decline. This was the story from last time. It began with a simple children's rhyme and ended with two wronged souls coming to claim a life. The whole process was strange and full of symbolism. Was the rhyme really the will of heaven, or was King Xuan simply frightened and finally sensed that great disaster was on its way? This story seems to be telling us that the downward slide of the Zhou dynasty had already begun quietly from that very moment. Last time on the show, we left King Xuan of Zhou riding out to hunt in the eastern suburbs. On the way back, he suddenly saw the ghosts of the two ministers he had wronged and killed, Dubo and Zhou. Their ghosts were driving a small chariot in front of his carriage, sometimes riding ahead, sometimes circling close to the wheels, loudly accusing him of being unjust and killing loyal officials for no reason. They were holding red bows and red arrows and shot straight at him. King Xuan was so terrified that he fainted on the spot in his chariot. When his attendants finally woke him up with ginger broth, he felt a sharp pain in his chest, as if something had been nailed into his heart. After he returned to the palace, his illness grew worse, day by day. Every time he closed his eyes, he would see Dubo and Zhou standing by his bed, staring at him. Sometimes they did not speak and only watched him with cold eyes. Sometimes they repeated the words they had shouted on the hunting field, saying he refused to govern with virtue, saying he only knew how to kill loyal ministers, saying that sooner or later he would pay for what he had done. The more he saw them, the more frightened he became. The more he thought about it, the more confused he felt, until in the end, he did not dare sleep for long and could only half sit and half lie there. The court doctors prescribed medicine, but he no longer wanted to drink it. Inside, he knew very well that this was not a simple illness of the body. It was fear in his heart, mixed with all the signs from the sky and the ominous children's rhyme pressing on him together. He himself believed that this time he would probably not escape his fate. Sometimes he would say to the attendants by his side, "This is not a sickness that medicine can cure." From that one sentence, you can hear how hopeless he felt. That in this state, he dragged on for a few days. By the third day, his condition clearly became more serious. His voice was very weak. His chest tightened again and again. Cold sweat often broke out all over his body. At this time, among the elder ministers who once held things together, Zhou Gong had already retired and was resting at home. Zhang Shanfu had already passed away and could no longer stand in the court to discuss important matters with him. King Xuan knew that there were fewer and fewer elder ministers he could truly rely on. He understood in his heart that he did not have much time left. The most important thing now was to arrange what would happen after his death and entrust the crown prince to trustworthy ministers. So he ordered two of the oldest and most loyal ministers to come to him. One was called Yin Jifu. The other was called Zhou. They had followed him through many campaigns to the south and north. They were veteran ministers of the older generation. When these two received the summons, they put on court robes at once and entered the palace to see the king. They walked along the long palace corridors, passed through gate after gate, and their hearts grew heavy. They could more or less guess that this might be the last time they would be called in. When they entered the bedroom, they saw King Xuan lying on the bed, his face pale, his breath weak, but his eyes still carrying a trace of unwillingness. Their hearts ached at the sight, and they both knelt down before the bed to bow and ask after his health. King Xuan spoke in a weak voice and told the attendants to help them up. The attendants carefully supported the two old men to stand. Leaning against the embroidered quilt, King Xuan took a moment to steady his breath, then slowly said to them, "From the day I came to the throne, I have sat on this seat for 46 years. Without you old ministers helping me manage military affairs and calm the feudal lords, Zhou would have fallen into chaos long ago. All these years, we have fought wars in the south and wars in the north. More than once, we were in real danger. Now, we cannot say the world is in perfect peace, but at least for the time being, the four directions are relatively quiet and the common people can still live their lives. I always thought I could hold on a few more years and slowly arrange everything. I did not expect that this illness would bring me down for good." He paused, took a few breaths, then went on. "The Crown Prince Gongni is not young anymore, but his mind is a bit confused. He cannot see far enough, and his temper is not steady. What I worry about most is that when I am gone, he will not be able to bear this burden. The reason I called you here today is to ask you face to face. After I am gone, I want you to help the crown prince the way you have helped me. You must do your best. Do not let the country our ancestors built collapse in our generation. Do not let the roots of Zhou be destroyed in our hands." As he spoke, his eyes grew red, and there was a deep helplessness in his voice. He knew very clearly that although he had once brought a brief revival to Zhou, he had also made many mistakes. From now on, everything could only be left to others. Yin, Jifu, and Xiao, who felt the same sorrow. They also knew that Crown Prince Gongni was far from an ideal heir. But at this moment, there was no other choice. They knelt again and replied solemnly, "Please be at ease. As long as we have even one breath left, we will do all we can to assist the Crown Prince, to follow the rights and laws left by the former kings, to protect the foundations of Zhou, and not dare to let the ancestors be shamed." On the other side of the story, the man who sold mulberry, wood bows, and wild grass quivers ran south as fast as he could after escaping the city. He held the baby girl he had pulled from the river tight in his arms. Inside, he was both scared and anxious. He knew the city was searching for this child everywhere. He did not dare go home. The only thing he could do was get out of the Zhou King's reach as quickly as possible. He walked and hid, always looking for a place where he could stay out of sight. After several days on the road, he finally reached the small town of Bo. Bo was far from the center of power. It was poor and remote. News spread slowly there. He felt this place might be safe and decided he would raise the baby girl here. But he was a man. He had no milk. He did not know anyone. He had no idea where to find someone who could feed a child. He was exhausted and worried, so he sat down by the roadside with the baby in his arms. The child was starving. Her cry was thin and weak, but kept going without stopping. Just when he was at his wit's end, a man named Sida happened to pass by. Sida saw him sitting there with a crying baby, and the cry sounded so pitiful that he walked over and asked what was going on. The man did not have the strength to hide anything, so he roughly told the whole story. When Sida heard it, he felt deep pity. His own family had just lost a newborn daughter. The baby girl had died, but his wife still had milk. Sida looked at this tiny, helpless child and said to the man, "Give the baby to me. My wife and I can raise her. As for where she came from, it is better if you never tell anyone. That'll be safer for you and for us." The man was overjoyed that someone was willing to take the child. He knew this girl had a strange fate. She had been pulled from the river by a flock of birds. It was very likely she would have an unusual future. He had nothing else to give, so he took all the cloths and cords he had with him and handed them over as thanks. CDA did not make a big deal out of it. He carried the baby home and asked his wife to nurse her. The baby soon recovered her strength and drank with real energy. Sida and his wife gave her a name. Since she had come to them in the town of Bo, they called her Bo Si. The girl of Bo Si grew up step by step. Her body got stronger and stronger, and her face more and more beautiful. When she reached 14, she was in fact only 14 years old, but her figure and her bearing were like a girl of 16 or 17. She already had a mature kind of beauty. Her looks were truly special. Her eyebrows were long and fine. Her eyes were bright. Her lips were full and well-shaped. Her skin was pale like carved jade. When she pinned up her hair, it was like a dark cloud hanging over her shoulders. Her fingers were like carved slices of white jade, long and even. She only wore rough cloth and wooden shoes, yet when she stood there, she looked like a picture. People in the village would look at her and say, "This child looks like she fell from the sky." But the Si family was poor. Their home was in a remote countryside spot. Bo Si was still young, and no one had come to ask for her hand. Time simply drifted by like this. Now let us turn back to Bo Rang's son, Hongda. Bo Rang had advised King Yung with honest words and was thrown into prison in the capital. He had already been locked up for 3 years without being released. Hongdi never stopped worrying about his father. He was always thinking about how he could save him. One day, he went out to the countryside to collect grain and rent from the fields. By chance, he passed by CDA's house. As he walked by, he saw a girl drawing water at the well. He first saw her face in the reflection of the water in the bucket, and that face was so beautiful that he froze for a moment. He looked up and saw Bo Si standing at the well. Even though she was dressed like an ordinary village girl, her features and her bearing were astonishing. Hongdi was stunned. Inside he thought, how can there be someone this beautiful? A woman like this is hidden away in a place this poor and remote. The longer he looked, the more amazed he felt. Then a thought flashed through his mind. He remembered that his father was still in prison. He also remembered that King Yu had been madly collecting beautiful women for his harem. At once he began to calculate in his heart, if I present this girl to King Yu, he will surely be pleased. As long as he is pleased, my father might be pardoned. The more he thought about it, the more he felt this was a real chance. He went to the neighbors to ask questions and confirmed that the girl was called Bo Si and that she was the adopted daughter of a man named Sida. When he went home, he told his mother about it. He said, "Father has not committed an unforgivable crime. He only angered King Yu by speaking the truth. Now, everyone in the capital knows that the king loves beautiful women. There is this man, Sida, in Bao, who is raising a girl of incredible beauty. If we bring enough silk and cloth to buy her and present her to King Yu, father might be released." It is the same idea as when San Yisheng once begged for his own king's life. His mother listened and said, "If this can save your father, a bit more cloth and silk is nothing. Go and do it at once." That very night, Hongda rushed to Sidia's house and said he wanted to bring Bosi into his home. He laid out 300 bolts of cloth and silk and said this was the price to buy Bosi. Sida was reluctant, but he also thought that if this daughter could enter the royal palace, maybe her future would be better. In the end, he agreed. After Bosi was brought to the Bo family home, her living conditions changed completely. They prepared warm water scented with herbs for her to bathe. They gave her chicken, duck, and fish and set out many dishes at every meal. They dressed her in clothes embroidered with patterns and taught her how to bow and speak properly in front of the king. They trained her to walk slowly and steadily, to sit with poise, and to keep an expression that was neither too cold nor too familiar. Bosi had grown up poor, but she was quick and clever. She picked things up very fast. When everything was ready, Hongdi took Bosi to Haiyoging, the royal capital. First he went to see Guogong and used money to open the way, asking him to help present Baosi to King Yu. He said, "My father Bao Rang knows that he offended the Son of Heaven and deserves death. But he is old, and I fear I will never see him again. So for his sake, I have sought out an extremely beautiful girl named Bo Si. I ask His Majesty to accept her, and I beg His Majesty to pardon my father." Guogong saw the money and was very willing to help. He passed the message on to King Yu. As soon as King Yu heard that someone was offering a beauty, he ordered that Bo Si be brought to the hall at once. Bo Si knelt and bowed according to the ritual. King Yu lifted his eyes and looked at her, and at once his eyes lit up. Never in his life had he seen a woman so beautiful. Bo Si's movements were gentle, her gaze bright, and her voice soft. When she sat down, it was as if she shone. King Yu could not stop smiling. For years he had collected women from everywhere, but none of them could be compared to Bo Si. On the spot, he decided to keep her and had her moved into a separate palace. He did not even tell Queen Shen. At the same time, he ordered that Bo Rang be pardoned and restored to his former office. That very night, King Yu slept with Bo Si. After that, the two of them were almost never apart. When they ate, they shared one bowl. When they drank, they traded cups. When they sat together, shoulder touched shoulder and leg pressed against leg. King Yu was completely lost in this pleasure and did not hold court for 10 days in a row. The ministers waited at the palace gate until their hope faded and went home sighing. This was the 4th year of King Yu's reign. From this day on, King Yu spent almost all his time in a special tower called Qiongtai, staying with Bo Si. For more than 3 months, he did not set foot in Queen Shen's quarters. When the queen heard about this, she was furious. One day, she simply took a group of palace maids and marched straight to Qiongtai. She happened to arrive just as King Yu and Bo Si were leaning against each other, sitting close. When King Yu saw the queen, he did not even stand up to greet her. Queen Shen could not hold back her anger. She pointed at Bo Si and shouted, "You low-born woman, How dare you come into my harem and cause trouble? King Yu was afraid the queen would strike Bosi, so he quickly stepped in front of her and said, "This is a beauty I have just chosen. I have not yet had time to give her a proper rank and send her to pay respect to you. Do not be angry." Queen Chen cursed them both for a while, then glared at King Yu with hatred in her eyes and left, grinding her teeth. Baosi was confused and later asked the king, "Who was that woman just now?" King Yu said, "That was the queen? By the rules, you should pay her a visit tomorrow and bow to her." Bosi said nothing, but the next day she did not go. Back in her own palace, Queen Shen stayed low and silent. She was filled with frustration. The crown prince Yiju saw that his mother's mood was dark. He knelt before her and said, "You are the mistress of the 6 palaces. What could trouble you this much?" Queen Shen sighed and said, "Your father dotes on Bosi and ignores rank and order. If this woman gains full favor, you and I may lose our place in this court." She told the prince everything, from Baosi's refusal to visit her to the way Baosi stayed seated when she appeared, and by the end, tears were streaming down her face. The crown prince was furious when he heard this. He said, "This is not hard to handle. Tomorrow is the first day of the month. Father will surely go to court. You can send a few palace maids to Qihongtai to pick flowers and draw Bosi out. I will hide nearby. As soon as she steps outside, I will give her a beating and let her know there is a mistress of the harem. She will not dare bully you again. Even if father is angry, I will take all the blame. It will not touch you." Queen Shen became even more worried. She said, "We cannot act rashly. We must think this over." The prince agreed with his mouth, but in his heart he had already decided. He held his anger for one more night. The next morning, King Yun did indeed go to court at dawn. The ministers came to greet him for the first day of the month. The crown prince at once sent dozens of palace maids to Qihongtai to pick flowers. The maids inside Qihongtai saw someone come and start picking flowers and ran out at once to stop them. They said, "These flowers were planted for Lady Bao. If you destroy them, it is a serious crime." The maids outside answered, "We were sent by the crown prince to pick flowers as an offering for the queen. If you stop us, you are disrespecting the queen." The two sides argued loudly. Bosi heard the noise and walked out. She saw people grabbing her flowers and was angry at once. She opened her mouth to scold them, but before she could speak, the crown prince suddenly leaped out from behind the bow. Sia was completely unprepared. The prince rushed forward, grabbed her hair and shouted, "You worthless thing with no rank. How dare you call yourself a lady today? I will teach you what your place is." With that, he punched her several times. The maids in Qihongtai were terrified. They all dropped to their knees and begged, "Your Highness, please remember that the king loves her. Please spare her for his sake." The crown prince was boiling with rage, but he was also afraid that if he hit too hard and killed her, things would get out of control. So he stopped. Baosi's face was swollen and red. Her eyes were puffed up. She held back her pain, went back into Qihongtai, and felt deeply wronged. The maids tried to comfort her. They said, "Do not cry. The king will surely stand up for you." Sure enough, not long after, King Yu came back from court and walked into Qihongtai. He saw Bosi's tears flowing non-stop and her hair all in a mess. He immediately asked, "What happened?" Bosi grabbed his sleeve and sobbed so hard she could barely speak. Bit by bit, she managed to say, "The crown prince brought palace maids to pick flowers. I have never offended him, but he rushed over and beat me and cursed me. If the maids here had not begged him, I would already be dead. Please, my king, give me justice." King Yu understood at once. It was because Baosi had never gone to pay her respects to Queen Shen. So the queen and the prince wanted to teach her a lesson. He said this was not really the prince's idea. It was arranged by the queen. "Do not blame the prince." Baosi wiped her tears and said, "The prince did it on behalf of his mother. Otherwise, he would not have hit me that hard. If I die, that is nothing. But I am carrying your child. I am already 2 months pregnant. My one life is 2 lives now. Please let me leave the palace so that I can at least protect the child in my belly." When King Yu heard that she was pregnant, he was instantly alarmed. He said, You rest first. I will take care of this." That same day, he issued an order. The Crown Prince Yizhu has no sense of ritual and does not know his place. Send him to the state of Xin and let Xin who discipline him. The teacher who educated the Crown Prince has taught poorly and will also be dismissed. When the prince heard this, he wanted to enter the palace to explain. But King Yu had already told the guards not to let him near. The prince had no choice but to drive his own chariot to Shen. Queen Shen waited in her quarters and never saw her son return. She sent maids to ask around and finally learned that her son had already been sent away. Alone in the palace, with no one to speak for her, she cried every day, her heart full of pain and hatred. After Bosi entered the palace, she soon became pregnant. Day after day went by. When the 10 full months were finally over, she gave birth to a son. King Yu was overjoyed. He held this child like a treasure in his hands and named him Bofu. From then on, whenever King Yu mentioned my son Bofu, his face would light up with a smile. As time passed, a thought slowly grew in his mind. He wanted to depose the original crown prince, Yizhu, the son of Queen Shen, and instead make this younger boy, Bofu, the new crown prince, the future heir to the throne. But King Yu also knew this was not something he could change with one sentence. If he suddenly announced, "I want to replace the crown prince," the ministers at court and the lords of other states would almost certainly have opinions. So he kept waiting for an opening. He could not find a good excuse. He was anxious inside but did not know how to bring it up. In the court, there was a minister named Guogong Shifu. He was very good at guessing what King Yu was thinking. He could see that the king no longer cared much about the old crown prince, and that he loved Bofu more and more. So he went in private to speak with Yin Jifu's son, Yin Qiu. The two of them put their heads together and decided that the best way was to work through Bosi. They went secretly to see Bosi and said to her in a low voice, "The old crown prince, Yizhu, has already been sent away to live with his grandfather, Shenhu. Now, in this palace, the only one who truly has the status to be crown prince is your son, Bofu. If those inside and outside the palace work together, if you speak to the king at his pillow, and we speak for you in the court, there is a real chance to make this happen." When Bosi heard this, she could not have been more pleased. She smiled and said, "Then I will rely on both of you to do your best. If Bofu really becomes crown prince and later inherits the realm, I will not forget you. We will run the kingdom together." From then on, Baosi began to prepare carefully. She knew that if she wanted to depose Queen Shen and the crown prince Yizhu, she could not just say so. She needed reasons. So she quietly sent her trusted people to listen for news inside and outside the palace, especially looking for anything that could be used as faults against Queen Shen. She placed eyes and ears in the back palace, among the servants, and at all sorts of palace gates. As long as anything happened in Queen Shen's part of the palace, Bosi would know very quickly. Now let us look at Queen Shen. After her son was sent away to the state of Shen, she lived alone in the palace, without a single person she could really talk to. Every day, she thought about her son, worried that he was suffering in a strange place, and at the same time hurt that her husband had abandoned her. She often sat alone and cried, sometimes several times in one day. In the palace, there was an older maid who had served Queen Shen for many years and understood her heart very well. One day, she saw the queen wiping away tears again, so she knelt down and said quietly, "My lady, if you miss the crown prince this much, why not secretly write him a letter and send it to the state of Shen? You could ask His Highness to write a letter to His Majesty, admitting he did not understand propriety and rules before, and say he is truly sorry and willing to change. Maybe that could soften His Majesty's heart. If the king can be moved a little and calls the crown prince back to the capital so that you can be together again, would that not be a good thing?" Queen Shen heard this and felt it made some sense. She sighed and said, "The problem is, there are eyes on me inside and outside the palace. Even if I write the letter, who can carry it out for me?" The maid thought for a moment and said, "I have an idea. My mother is called Old Lady Wen. She knows some simple treatments and can be considered half a doctor. If your ladyship pretends to be sick and asks someone to summon her into the palace to see you, she can secretly take the letter out. Once she leaves the palace, my brother can help send the letter onto the state of Shen. If we arrange it step by step and stay careful, it should not be discovered. Queen Shen felt this plan might work, so she nodded and agreed. That night, under the lamplight, she wrote a letter to the Crown Prince Yigu with her own hand. The meaning of the letter was roughly this: your father is foolish and without moral principle, and spoils a seductive woman. Because of her, we, mother and son, were torn apart. Now this enchantress has given birth to a son, and is even more favored. You can write a first letter to your father, pretending to admit your mistakes. Say, I have changed. I am willing to start again. Please forgive me. If your father is truly moved and calls you back to the capital so we can be together, then we can slowly think about what to do next. When she finished, she hid the letter inside her clothing and tucked it under her pillow. The next day, she lay in bed and pretended to be sick. She did not get up. Her face showed the look of illness. She told the maid to go and summon the old lady went to the palace to see her. But in the palace, whenever something moved on one side, someone on the other side would feel it. Bosi already had people watching Queen Shen's movements. When she heard that Queen Shen was suddenly sick and had specially summoned an old woman from outside to treat her, her first thought was, there must be something here. They are probably trying to send a message in secret. Baosi immediately told the gate officers, when that old woman leaves the palace, you must search her body very carefully and see if she is carrying anything. Now back to old lady Wen. She was called into the main palace and met Queen Shen. Her daughter had already explained the plan to her, so she first pretended to take the queen's pulse, touched her wrists and asked a few questions like, where does your ladyship feel discomfort? Then, while no one was paying attention, Queen Shen quietly took the letter from under her pillow, slipped it into the old woman's hand, and whispered, this letter is very important. Once you leave the palace, you must send it to the state of Shen that very night. Do not delay. Queen Shen was afraid she would suffer on the road, so she also rewarded her with 2 bolts of colored silk. Old Lady Wen felt quite pleased. She believed that if this plan worked, it would help the queen and be good for her daughter as well. She tucked the letter into her clothing, took the 2 bolts of silk in her arms, and walked slowly toward the palace gate. At the gate, the guard asked, as usual, where did those 2 bolts of silk in your arms come from? The old woman answered naturally, I came to see the queen as a doctor. These are my reward from her ladyship. The guard then asked, besides these 2 bolts of silk, do you have anything else on you? Old Lady Wen felt a stab of fear inside, but still said out loud, nothing else. The guard was about to let her go, but another official beside him said, if we do not search her, how can we be sure she really does not have anything else? So, they pulled the old woman back for a proper search. She was nervous, kept shifting around, and did not dare look up. Her whole manner looked guilty. The guard felt something was wrong. He reached out and yanked open her collar, and a corner of paper slipped out from her clothing. He grabbed the letter at once. One glance at the writing was enough to see it was from the queen. They did not dare wait. They tied old lady Wen up on the spot and took her, along with the letter, to Qiyongtai to hand her over to Baosi. Baosi received the letter in Qiyongtai and opened it to read. The more she read, the angrier she became. The letter called her a seductive woman, said she had bewitched King Yu, said she was monopolizing favor and power. At the end, it talked about making another plan, which clearly hinted that once mother and son were together again, they would take action in the future. Baosi thought, this is obviously plotting against me and my son. She did not go to see King Yu right away. First, she ordered old lady Wen to be locked up and not allowed to speak. Then she took the 2 bolts of silk that Queen Shen had given the old woman, and in front of her attendants, she cut them up with scissors, snipping them into pieces until silk scraps were all over the floor. In this action, there was anger and also a clear message. I want you to see what happens when you challenge me. When King Yu came back from outside and entered Qiyongtai, he saw the table and the floor covered with silk cut into bits and asked, whose silk is this? Why is it being cut like this? Baosi's eyes reddened. She let tears gather in them and said softly, I came into the palace as a woman with no background, but by chance I was favored by you, my king. The main queen has been jealous of me from the start. She has always treated me badly. Now that I have given birth to a son, she hates me even more. Today, she wrote a letter to the crown prince, and at the end, she wrote, we will make another plan. It is obvious that she is secretly planning with her son how to get rid of me and Bofu in the future. Our lives are in their hands. Of course I am afraid. Please, my king, give me justice. She handed the letter to King Yu. King Yi saw the handwriting and knew it really was from Queen Shen. He asked, "Who carried this letter out?" Bao Si answered, "It was that old lady, Wen. She is still locked up here." When King Yu heard this, he was furious. He felt that the queen was openly contacting her son behind his back. His heart turned even more to Bo Si. He ordered on the spot that old lady Wen be dragged out. He did not question her, did not give her any chance to explain. He drew his sword and cut her in two with a single stroke. Blood splashed all over the place. It was a brutal scene. That night, while King Yu's anger had not fully settled, Bao Si spoke to him quietly at his pillow again. Her voice was soft, but every word hit where it hurt. She said, "Our lives are now in the hands of the crown prince. The moment he comes back and gains power, he can move against me and Bofu whenever he likes." King Yu said, "As long as I am here, what can he do?" Bao Si answered, "The problem is that one day you will leave this world. Sooner or later, someone has to take your place. Now the queen sits in her palace all day, hating you and cursing you. If she and the crown prince regain power in the future, their first move will almost surely be against us. At that time, we will not only lose comfort and status, we may not even keep our bones in one piece." After saying this, she sobbed softly and put herself in the position of a helpless, weak woman. King, you felt his chest tighten as she spoke. He was silent for a moment, then said, "To tell the truth, I have long wanted to depose Queen Shen and depose the Crown Prince Zhou as well. I want to make you the new queen and Bofu the new crown prince. But this matter is too big. I am afraid the ministers will not agree, and I do not know how to speak of it." Bao Si had been waiting for this sentence. She immediately answered, "In our world, when ministers obey the king, that is called loyalty. When a king obeys his ministers in everything, that is called being controlled by them. You are the son of heaven. What you say becomes the rule. You can simply tell the court your decision and let them discuss. As long as you are firm, most of them will not dare to oppose you." King Yu felt this sounded right. He said, "Then we will do what you say." That same night, Bao Si secretly sent word to Guogong, Shifu, and Yanqiu, telling them to say what they had agreed on during the next morning's court session, so they could help King Yu push through deposing the queen and deposing the crown prince in front of everyone. The next morning, court was held. After the rites were done, the ministers stood in their places. King Yu said, "The queen has hated me out of jealousy. She wrote to the crown prince and secretly plotted what they will do to me and to the son I have newly raised up. Can such a person still be the mistress of the 6 palaces? I want to bring her out and punish her. What do you all think?" Guogong Shifu spoke up at once. "The queen is the head of the inner palace and in name the mother of the realm. Even if she has done wrong, there is no need to drag her out and question her like a criminal. If her virtue does not match her position, your majesty can simply issue a decree and depose her. Then you can choose another virtuous lady from among the concubines to become the new queen. That is how you set an example for the people and show them what a worthy queen mother should be." Yanqiu followed immediately. "I have heard that Lady Bo's character and conduct are both excellent. She is kind and gentle. She would be perfect as the new queen." King Yu frowned a little and said, "The crown prince is now living in the state of Shen. If I depose Queen Shen, what about him?" Guogong Shifu said, "When the mother is honored, the son is honored with her. When the son is honored, the mother is honored with him. Mother and son rise and fall together. Now the crown prince has already been sent away for disobedience, and his filial piety and propriety are long forgotten. Since his mother is no longer worthy to be queen, it will be hard for him to stay crown prince. We are all willing to support Bofu as the new crown prince. As long as you nod, that will be a blessing for the kingdom." King Yu saw how smoothly they were playing their parts and felt very satisfied. He issued an order on the spot. Queen Shen was to be locked away in the cold palace and never come out again. The crown prince Yuzhu was stripped of his title and lowered to commoner status. Bao Si was made the new queen. Bofu was made the new crown prince. At the end, he added a harsh line. Anyone who dared to oppose this decision would be treated as a supporter of the former crown prince and punished as a serious criminal. This was the 9th year of King Yu's reign. The civil and military officials standing on both sides mostly felt deep injustice for Queen Shen and Zhou, but they also knew that King Yu had made up his mind. Anyone who stood up and said no might lose his life on the spot. So everyone kept their mouths shut and only sighed in their hearts. The Grand Astrologer, Bo Yangfu, stood in the ranks, watched it all, and let out a long sigh. He said, "The proper moral relationships between ruler and minister, father and son, husband and wife are being destroyed by them, piece by piece. If it continues like this, how much longer can the Zhou kingdom last?" That same day, he submitted a memorial, asking to retire and return to his hometown, no longer taking part in government. Other principled ministers also started looking for reasons to resign and go home. In the court, those who remained were more and more like Ying Qiu, Guo, Shifu, and Jigong, people whose main skill was flattery. King Yu spent all day in the back palace drinking and making merry with Bosi, and cared less and less about affairs of state. It is very ironic. Even though Bozi had climbed from a simple concubine to the position of main queen, and was the only woman King Yu truly favored, she almost never smiled. King Yu tried every way he could think of to make her happy. He called in musicians to beat drums and strike great bells, to play flutes and zithers, and to perform songs and dances while they ate. He hoped she would be amused, but Bosi watched and watched, her face calm and cold, without any sign of joy. In the end, King Yu could not help it. He asked her, "Do you not like music? What do you actually like?" Bosi thought for a moment and said, "I do not have any special hobbies. I only remember that once, when I was a child, I was tearing up colored silk. The sound of the silk ripping was actually quite nice." As soon as King Yu heard this, he said, "If you like the sound of ripping silk, why did you not say so earlier?" He immediately ordered the storehouse officers to send 100 bolts of colored silk to the palace. They piled them up, then ordered strong palace maids to rip them up piece by piece so that Bosi could listen to the sound to her heart's content. Even though Bosi did enjoy that sound, her face still did not show a smile. King Yu looked at her and felt both anxious and helpless. He sighed and asked, "Why do you never smile?" Bosi answered calmly, "From the day I was born until now, I have never smiled." King Yu grew even more anxious. He said, "No matter what, I will find a way to make you smile at least once." He issued a notice to the outside and a verbal order inside the palace. Whether in the court or outside it, anyone who could make the queen smile just once would be greatly rewarded. People later summed this up as spending 1,000 pieces of gold to buy one smile. Guo Shifu came to offer another idea. He said to King Yu, "Earlier, the former kings were afraid the western tribes would grow stronger and might bring troops to attack, so they built more than 20 beacon towers in the area around Mount Li and placed great war drums beside them. If enemies appeared, they would light the beacons, burning wolf dung mixed with straw so that the smoke rose straight into the sky. The nearby lords would see the wolf smoke and know the capital was in danger. They would gather their troops and hurry here to help. When they came close to Mount Li, they would hear the drums pounding and know they had to speed up. Since this system was built, the realm has been mostly peaceful, and it has never really been used. If His Majesty wants to make the Queen laugh, you can invite her to visit Mount Li, hold a banquet in the Li Palace, and after dark, suddenly light the beacons. The lords, seeing the signal, will rush here with their armies. When they arrive and find there is no war at all, only the king and queen drinking and laughing in the palace, they will realize they have been tricked. Queen Bo will probably find this very funny. King, you thought this idea was fresh and exciting. This is a great idea, he said. Soon, he and Bosi took a carriage and went together to Mount Li with their attendants. That night, they held a feast in the palace halls there, drinking and talking. King, you gave the order to light the beacons and send up the wolf smoke. At the same time, the war drums on the towers began to pound. At that moment, a lord named Zheng Boyu happened to be traveling with his troops nearby, on his way to the capital to pay his respects. He saw the beacon flames rising in the distance and thought the capital was in great danger. He was shocked, turned his army at once, and raced toward Mount Li. When he arrived, he found that King Yu had only lit the beacons and beaten the drums in order to make the queen laugh, and was at that moment drinking calmly in the tower. Zhou went to see the king and hurried to advise him, saying, "The beacon towers were built by the former kings to guard against invasion. Because of this, for many years, the lords have trusted them completely. Whenever wolf smoke rises, they do not dare delay. They rush with all their strength to rescue the capital. Today, your majesty lit the beacons for no reason other than a joke. You are making fools of them and burning away their trust. If there is ever real danger in the future and you light the beacons again, the lords may no longer believe you. If that happens, you will not be able to call on their soldiers. You will have no one to save your state. How will your majesty defend your kingdom then?" King Yu frowned and felt impatient. He said, "Is the world not peaceful now? Where is there any war? How can you be so sure of what will happen later?" "I am just playing a little joke with the lords and looking for a bit of fun. You speak as if the sky is about to fall. You are just scaring yourself. If there is trouble in the future, people in the future will deal with it." "What does that have to do with you?" After this, he refused to listen to Zhou and ordered the fires and drums to continue. The flames lit up half the sky. The drums echoed like thunder across the land. The nearby lords saw the smoke and heard the drums. They all thought the capital was under attack. They called out their men, put on armor, mounted their horses, and rode hard through the night. When they reached Mount Li, they found no trace of enemies. Instead, they heard music and the sound of cups clinking from the tall tower. When they asked what was happening, they learned that King Yu had only lit the beacons for fun, just to drink and play with his new queen. The lords looked at each other, their faces full of shame and anger. They were tired, embarrassed, and unhappy, but could only roll up their banners and lead their troops back, feeling they had been made into clowns. Some of them were deeply offended, but could not speak out and only kept it in their hearts. Bosi stood on the high floor of the Li Palace, leaning on the railing, looking down at the busy scene below. At first, the armies rushed in, thinking there was a major crisis. Then, they realized they had been used as a joke and left in a hurry. Bosi watched all of this and found it very amusing. At last, she could not hold back. She laughed out loud and even clapped her hands. King Yu was overjoyed to see her laughing so happily. He turned to those beside him and said, "This smile is truly worth 1,000 pieces of gold. We have to thank Guo Shifu for his idea." So he really rewarded Yuo Shifu with a huge amount of money. So much that people truly could say 1,000 in gold for one smile. Later generations summed this up as buying a smile with 1,000 pieces of gold, and they were referring to this very scene. But almost no one stopped to think that this meaningless prank had burned away a large part of the Lord's trust. When real danger came later, no matter how many times King Yu lit the beacons, people would not necessarily believe him. When we reach the story of how Western Zhou was truly destroyed, you will see that its fall did not come all at once. It was the result of using up trust, destroying rules, and crossing bottom lines, step by step, until there was nothing left. Now let us turn back to Shen who, out of his own fief in the state of Shen, he very quickly heard about several major things King Yu had done in the capital. First, King Yu had locked his own daughter, Queen Shen, in the cold palace and no longer allowed her to manage the inner court. Then he deposed his grandson Yi Zhu's title as crown prince and reduced him to a commoner. Right after that, he raised Bosi to be the new queen and made Bofu the new crown prince. When Shenhu read these reports, he was both angry and afraid. He was angry because his own daughter had been badly wronged, and his grandson had been driven out of the palace and now even stripped of his rank. He was afraid because he could see that what King Yu was doing was exactly the same road that the last king of the Xia dynasty, Ji, and the last king of the Shang dynasty, King Zhou, had walked. Shen, who was an old minister who had seen a lot of the world, he knew very clearly that any dynasty which reached this point was usually not far from collapse. He thought about it for a few days and decided that he still had to stand up and say at least one honest word. So he wrote a letter of remonstrance with his own hand and sent someone to carry it to Haiyojing for King Yu. The main idea of the letter went like this: In the old days, the last king of the Xia dynasty, Ji, doted on a concubine named Meishi. He ignored the rules of the court and ignored the suffering of the people. All day long, he only chased pleasure with her. In the end, he destroyed the Xia dynasty. Later, the last king of the Shang dynasty, King Zhou, did the very same thing. He doted on a woman named Dag. To please her, he was willing to do any evil thing. In the end, the Shang dynasty also fell. Now, your majesty pampers Bo. See, in the same way, you depose your original queen, lock her in the cold palace, and depose the original crown prince. You raise the son of a concubine, Bo Fu, to be the new crown prince. On one hand, this destroys the proper rights and moral obligations that should exist between husband and wife and makes the principal wife suffer deeply. On the other hand, it wounds the relationship between father and son and fills the old crown prince's heart with resentment. What happened with King Ji of Xia and King Zhou of Shang is not far from us in time. It is as if it is happening all over again right now. The kind of disaster that destroyed the Xia and Shang dynasties will not take many years to play out again. I write this letter not for myself, and not only for my daughter and my grandson. I write it for the altars and temples of the Zhou dynasty and for all the people under heaven. I beg your majesty to quickly take back these unfair orders. Do not depose the rightful and establish the secondary. As long as you are willing to turn back now, there may still be a chance to avoid the great calamity of home destroyed and country lost. When the letter entered the palace, King Yu ordered someone to read it to him. Halfway through, his face had already darkened. When the letter was finished, King Yi slammed the table in anger and said, "That old fellow has gone too far. How dare he use such words to criticize me? How dare he put me together with those rulers who destroyed their own kingdoms?" Ji and King Zhou, Guo Gong Shifu, took the chance to feed his anger and said, "From the moment Shen, who saw the crown prince driven out of the capital, he has been unhappy with you in his heart. Now that he has heard you depose his daughter and depose his grandson, his resentment has only grown deeper. This letter is not loyal advice. He is not sincerely remonstrating. He is picking at you on purpose, exposing your weak points, and using this chance to stir up trouble. Right now, he still holds military power in the state of Shen. If we do not think of a way to handle him early, in the future, he may very well bring troops against you." King Yu listened and turned to ask, "Then according to you, what should I do?" Guo Shifu already had a plan in his mind. He said right away, "Shen, who himself has no great battle achievements, he has not done anything truly outstanding in war. The reason his status rose higher and higher was only because he once sent his daughter into the palace to be queen. He relied on his daughter and his grandson to have a face at court. Now the queen has been deposed, and the crown prince has been deposed. The root from which he gained his position is already gone. In my view, you can issue a decree to strip him of his marquis rank, change him from Shenhu back to a simple Shenbo, one grade lower in title, so that he is only an ordinary vassal. Let him go back quietly to his own fief and behave like a normal small lord. Later, when the time is ripe, we can slowly gather troops and then deal with him fully. That will remove a major threat from your heart. This way, he will not be able to raise big waves right away, and he will not be forced into open rebellion at once. First cut down his power, then deal with him in full later. Advance and retreat stay in your hands." The more King Yu listened, the more comfortable he felt. He thought that Guo Shifu's words were sensible. He had already been holding a belly full of anger over that letter, and now someone had just handed him a good excuse. So King Yu nodded on the spot and said, "Fine, we will do it your way." Very soon, the court issued an edict announcing that Shenhu was to be demoted to Shenbo. In other words, his rank was lowered from marquis to the rank below. He would no longer be one of the great, powerful lords. After taking this first step, King Yu still felt it was not enough. He issued a second command, appointing Guo Shifu as commander-in-chief and ordering him to muster soldiers and war chariots, drill the army, and prepare to march against the state of Shen. He was basically announcing to the outside world, Shen, who not only refuses to obey the Son of Heaven, he even dares to write letters to scold me. Now, I will personally send troops to show him who truly rules the world. Everyone inside and outside the palace understood that this war was not simply about punishing one vassal. It meant that the whole chain of deposing the queen and deposing the crown prince had finally been torn open and turned into a direct, official break between the Son of Heaven and his own father-in-law. On one side was King Yu of Zhou, holding the authority of the royal house and the troops of the capital. On the other side was Shen, who had earned merit before and still had his own armed forces within his fief, and might also gain support from powers outside. Guo Shifu was busy in the capital recruiting soldiers and choosing officers. The camps were full of activity. War chariots were being repaired one by one, and armor was being polished piece by piece. Out in the state of Shennu, once they received the news, they did not simply sit and wait. Shen, who was old in years but very clear in his mind, he knew this battle would be a matter of life and death. That in the end, who would win this war? Could King, you really crush Shen? Would Shen, who be destroyed once and for all? Or would this war shake the foundations of Western Zhou even more? We will continue this story in the next episode. Chinese culture mini lesson. Where did people actually get exiled to in ancient China? Today, let's talk about something that sounds a bit heavy, but is full of vivid images. When someone was exiled in ancient China, where exactly did they get sent? You can first picture this scene in your mind. A dirt road stretches out from the capital, winding into the distance. The sky is still dark, just a bit of gray light. A few ox carts creak slowly forward. On the carts are prisoners, hands tied, wearing rough hemp clothes, heavy wooden shackles on their feet. The soldiers escorting them are yawning, swearing under their breath while they walk. The wheels bump over stones and potholes, making that long iya sound. For the prisoners, this road is not just a trip dot, it is a one-way journey. Once they leave, they will probably never come back again in their lifetime. In ancient times, exile was a very old punishment. It already existed in the pre-Qian period. One of the earliest famous cases was in the Shang dynasty, when the powerful minister Yan drove King Taijia out of the capital and kept him under house arrest outside. People later called it Yan exiling Taijia. Later, in the Zhou, Qin, and Han dynasties, exile slowly became a formal, very serious punishment written into the law. By then, it stood together with flogging, beating, hard labor, exile, and execution as the 5 main punishments of the state. From our modern point of view, exile may not sound as terrible as beheading. It feels like, well, you just move to a different place and keep living. But for people in ancient China, it was not like that at all. Traditional Chinese society cared deeply about clan, ancestral graves, and falling leaves returning to the root. Once you were forced to leave your home region for good, it basically meant your life had been cut in half. You were still breathing, but your connection to your ancestors, your hometown, your family line had been severed. In a way, the real you had already been declared over. On top of that, most places of exile were very harsh environments. The more serious the crime, the farther you were sent, the worse the conditions. These were usually places that were barren, humid, stiflingly hot, full of disease, hard to reach, and short of supplies. Many people didn't even make it to the place of exile. They died on the road. Think about it. You are walking day after day, under guard, in chains, with barely enough food, hardly any sleep. If you get sick, no one really treats you. People just keep walking. Some prisoners simply collapse by the roadside ditch one day and never get up again. Alright, let's look at some of the famous exile destinations in history. We can start with a place whose name sounds gentle and elegant, but was anything but romantic in reality, Fangling. Today, it is roughly in the Xihan area of Hubei province. In ancient times, it was a well-known place of exile. People sent there were often nobles, relatives of the royal family, or high-ranking officials. Their status was not low at all. For example, when Qin destroyed the state of Shao, they exiled members of the Shao royal family to around this region. During the Ming dynasty, guilty princes of the imperial clan were often sent to Fangling, where they lived hidden away in the mountains. On paper, they were still alive. In political reality, they had already disappeared. Even in the Tang dynasty, Emperor Taizong Li Shimin once had a cousin who plotted rebellion. When he was caught, he almost got exiled to this area too. You can picture it this way. A prince who used to live in the capital in silk robes, riding in carriages with a crowd of attendants, suddenly has his hat torn off, his robe stripped away, and is forced into prison clothes. He is sent to a small mountain county with very little arable land. When he looks up, all he sees are heavy, gray mountains. When he looks down, it is mud roads. Even the language people speak around him has turned into a local dialect he is not used to. Everything that was once familiar to him is now far, far away. That psychological drop is sometimes more painful than simple physical suffering. If we keep moving south, there is another place often described in books as a wild and barbaric land, the Lizhou Peninsula and Hainan Island. Before the Song dynasty, this region was already seen by people in the Central Plains as the ends of the earth. From the Temsin Song onward, this area almost became a synonym for the exile of scholars and officials. One of the most famous is Han Yu, because he submitted a memorial to the emperor, criticizing something Temxianzong did not want to hear. Han Yu was demoted in anger to serve in Chaozhou. Go further south. You reach Lizhou. Further south again, Changzhou, that is, today's Hainan Island. When Han Yu arrived in Chaozhou, he heard that the local dishes included things like crab paste and river snails, many of the foods he had never seen before, and he really could not get used to eating them. Imagine it. A scholar from North China suddenly thrown into a small southern coastal city. He looks up and sees coconut trees. He looks down and sees seawater and sandy beaches. The air is full of that heavy, fishy, salty, humid smell. That sense of, where on earth have I come to, must have been very strong. Later, the famous song, Official Su, she was also demoted many times to Huangzhou, Huzhou, and then Danzhou. Danzhou is on the north coast of Hainan Island. At that time, Hainan was not a holiday paradise. For many people in the Central Plains, it was a strange land they would never expect to set foot on in their lifetime. When Sushi got there, all around him were rough coastlines, huge waves, small villages hidden behind swaying trees, and local people whose dialect he could barely understand. He wrote in a poem, "If someday someone writes a geography of the empire, let him mark that 10,000 miles to the south, Hainan has become my true home." There is this mix of self-mockery and resignation in that line. You can feel the bitterness under the humor. But if you stand on a beach in Sanya today, look at that deep blue sea, feel the sea wind in the palm trees, surrounded by people in sunglasses, drinking coconut juice. It is very hard to imagine that, in the past, this same place was a sea of suffering in people's minds, a destination of exile. The same sound of waves, the same sand, mean completely different things to people in different times. Now let's look north. By the Qing dynasty, another famous exile zone appears. The northeast, what was then called Manchuria. The Qing court especially liked sending criminals there because this was the Manchu homeland, the dragon rising place of the imperial clan. It was far away, bitterly cold, heavily guarded, and under strict military control. Once you were sent there, it was almost impossible to escape. Among the exile sites in the northeast, the most famous is Ninjut. This name later became almost a symbol in literature for being exiled to the end of the world. In many novels, as soon as someone is sent to Ningjuta, people immediately picture heavy snow everywhere. Prisoners in thin, worn cotton coats, cutting trees, hauling firewood, building fortifications in the freezing wind. Their faces are bright red with cold, their hands covered with frostbite. There was a saying in the Qing period. Once an official heard he had been sentenced to exile to Nanyuta to serve as a slave to armored troops. It was basically the same as receiving a death sentence. Serving as a slave to armored troops meant that once you arrived, you had to be a servant to the local garrison. You did the hardest, dirtiest, most exhausting labor. Many people were worked or frozen to death in just 2 or 3 years. And the road, there was no better. People later described that the path to Ninguta was nothing but mountains, wild land, and frozen rivers. Many prisoners dropped in the snow and never managed to stand up again. All around them, only chains of footprints and frozen branches remained. Some people even said, "People say the road to the Yellow Springs is hard to walk. But once you've been to Ninguta, even 10 roads to hell would not scare you." Of course, that is exaggerated, but it shows how terrible people felt it was. Besides the northeast, there were also exile spots in Sichuan, Guizhou, Xinjiang, Inner Mongolia, and some remote areas of Hubei. The common pattern is clear: far, remote, poor, and harsh. Either bitterly cold or stiflingly hot and full of disease. In any case, it was never a place with nice weather and convenient travel. Someone might ask, if those places were so miserable, why didn't the exiles just escape and walk back home? People in ancient times thought about this too, so the system already had answers that first. The distance was truly huge. Between the place of exile and the old hometown were mountains, desolate plains, deserts, rivers. There were no maps, no supply lines, no ID documents, no phones, no trains. You were clearly an outsider wherever you went. To eat or drink, you had to beg or depend on strangers. If you ran into government patrols on the road, it was very easy to get caught and sent back, with extra punishment added. More importantly, for many serious criminals, there was another step before departure: tattooing. Before they left, the authorities would tattoo their faces. Usually, the left cheek carried the crime, and the right cheek carried the place of exile. By the Qing dynasty, these tattoos might be in both Chinese characters and Manchu script. You can imagine, a person walks down the street with characters on his face reading 3 years of hard labor or permanent exile to such and such place. Anyone who sees him knows at a glance that he is a criminal, and very likely an escaped one. There is no way to hide it. These face records meant that a person could basically never wipe their slate clean again. If you zoom the camera in closer, you can see a small, quiet detail. A man sentenced to exile is standing at a river, washing his face. In the water's reflection, he can see the tattooed characters on his cheeks. Those words ripple with the waves, as if they are reminding him, your old identity, your old life, have been carved into your skin. They will never be erased. Of course, history is always complicated. Not every exile lived a pure hell on earth. There were a few people who, with some ability and some luck, slowly adapted to the new environment and put down roots. Some even made real contributions on the frontier and became important local figures. For example, there were people exiled to Yunnan or Guizhou who later helped develop those border regions. They brought farming techniques, craft skills, and education from the Central Plains to these areas. There were also people who, once they were far away from the centers of power, set aside their ambition. They lived a life of teaching, farming, drinking tea, and writing poems. But overall, for the vast majority, exile was really another form of slow death. You didn't lose your head to the executioner's blade, but over long years, you were peeled away from your old life, piece by piece. Your dignity, your relationships, your sense of future were worn down bit by bit. In the end, what might be left is a small, lonely grave on some open land that even later generations will find hard to locate. So, today, when we go to Sanya or Hainan for vacation, or ride a high-speed train, or drive to the northeast to see snow and eat hot pot from an iron cauldron, almost no one thinks about this other layer of history. The same sea wind, the same snowfield, in another era, meant a lifetime of exile, far from home, with no return date. Maybe because of that, when we stand by the ocean, or stand in the snow now, if we think a little about the people who once suffered here, our hearts may grow a bit softer. That person on the exile cart, bumpy road under his wheels, turning his head one last time to look in the direction of his hometown, was probably just like us today. In his heart, he may have quietly asked himself, will I ever come back again?
Sky in light, Nua healed the broken heart. Fuxi traced the world's design. Every age leaves stories breeze bright. Yaya dynasty shaped bronze. Shang dynasty cast oracle bones. Thou dynasty built right. Qin dynasty forged the great walls. Han dynasty opened Silk Road winds. Three Kingdoms dynasty turned war to tales. Qin dynasty led ink and mountains bloom. Sui dynasty carved the Grand Canal. Tang dynasty crowned the world with art. Song dynasty raised learning's flame. Yuan dynasty swept the northern plains. Ming dynasty strengthened walls again. Qing dynasty closed an ancient end. Every age leaves stories bright. History and myth ignite in endless light. China's history moves in mystery through the night. Footsteps of this land enchant the world in light. Han dynasty opened Silk Road winds. Three Kingdoms dynasty turned war to tales. Qin dynasty led ink and mountains bloom. Sui dynasty carved the Grand Canal. Tang dynasty crowned the world with art. Song dynasty raised learning.